Welcome to another episode of the podcast known as Blending the Family. I'm your host, Tommy Maloney. How are you doing? You doing well? I hope you are. I am a little frustrated because I'm still having to record in my wife's home office. I'd rather be recording in my office. If you haven't heard the story, I screwed up my computer. I have a little sip of water. Yeah, love that H2O. I tried to fix the slowness of Wi-Fi and somehow remove the ability to use Wi-Fi on my MacBook Pro. But eventually, hopefully soon, hopefully in April, as this is the month of March, I will get a new laptop. Hopefully. Or let me rephrase that. I shouldn't say April. I'm going to wait until the new MacBook Pros are out. They have some new ones coming out. All right. And I had something else to mention. I totally forgot. Chris Natzke is on this episode. And Chris Natzke and I have known each other for a long time. And one of the things I've said to Chris is, we know each other, but we really don't know each other. So that's why I'm excited to have Chris on the podcast. He's an author. He's a speaker. He's actually the coolest thing I can say. This will be a first, but he will be the first guest that is an 8th degree black belt, master instructor, and former national taekwondo champion. Yeah, he could really kick your butt. Well, he could kick my butt, but Chris is a nice guy. He's a really nice guy. And we're going to talk about his new book that is out called Breakthrough: 3 Winning Strategies to Create Breakthrough Results in Your Life, Your Business, and Relationships. Little information. So, like I said, I'm recording this in my wife's office because the way I screwed up my computer is I somehow removed the ability to use Wi-Fi, and so she has the cable stuff in her office, and my office is bigger. I mean, it's one of our spare bedrooms, so convert it into an office. But I also have a standing desk. I like my standing desk. I like to me, I have more energy when I'm standing. I don't feel I have the energy right now as I'm sitting here talking to you. So I miss my office. And I love my office. I love the ability to go downstairs and write and be creative. Ironically, where I'm broadcasting, this used to be my office. Actually, we shared this office, but then when COVID hit, I was grounded. Well, not from my wife or my parents, but from work. And we decided if she had to work from home and we were in the same office, she'd probably kill me. So luckily for us, we decided to separate our offices. And like I said, I love my office. I'm still working on it. I only have one bookcase right now, and I have a lot of books. Imagine talking to authors, and they're kind enough to send me their books, so I get a lot of books. I need more book space. I need more bookcases. One is just not enough. Or as Depeche Mode would say, just not enough. I can't sing. I don't know why I'm so tired. All of a sudden I got tired. I don't know what it is. But you're doing good. I'd love to know. Are you going for a walk right now? Are you going jogging? Are you climbing Kilimanjaro right now? I don't know. Are you driving? My buddy Scott Moreau, who's been on this podcast, he sent me a text message the other morning of him driving to his silent partner, aka his day job, and on on the screen where the radio is, he took a picture of listening to a podcast episode with Jason Kreidman. So I was like, this is so cool. So Scott, if you're listening to this episode, thank you. That meant a lot to me. Oh, that's something I want to mention. So I've been home again, and so the routine is that when my wife gets home, I take Otis to the dog park because we only have one car. I mean, I'm on the road normally 100% of the time, so no reason to pay for insurance on another car. So it's been wonderful that Otis and I get to spend time at the dog park until last night. Having some more water. There was this one gentleman there who had two German Shepherd dogs, and they were bullying. They were bullying poor Otis. And I wish we could have stayed at the dog park a little longer, but this guy wasn't controlling his dogs, and I felt bad for Otis. I didn't want him to just get, the living snot kicked out of him. And so it was just so frustrating because this is our time to get out. I know you're probably saying, well, why don't you just take him for a walk? He's not a fan. He's not a fan of walks. He loves, he's a different dog at the dog park. He's very well behaved at the dog park. He'll listen to me. He will stay with me at times, but he just loves the dog park. I mean, I have got him trained to go from the car, out of the car, to the gate to get into the dog park. And then once he gets into the dog park, it's like a cannonball being shot out. He's like a little missile. But I was bummed last night that this guy wouldn't control his dog. So listen out there, please, if you're at the dog park, will you maintain some order with your dogs? All right. Speaking of order, no, you're out of order. Anyway, Chris Natzke, new book, Breakthrough, 3 winning strategies to create breakthrough results in your life, business, and relationship. And Chris and I met, oh gosh, and I'm trying to remember the year. I want to say maybe 2010, maybe 2009, maybe even before that. Hold on. I'm trying to do the math when I get divorced. I got divorced in 2008. Okay, so maybe it was 2009. I attended as a guest of the Colorado chapter of the National Speakers Association. And this is where I met Chris. And the hardest thing for me going to a place like the National Speakers Association is networking. I want to be a wallflower. I just want to go, and those meetings were like morning meetings on a Saturday, and they were great because I would go in, I would find a place to sit in the back, grab some coffee, grab some fruit, whatever, and I just want to be my introvert self. But I specifically remember some event where we had to walk around and meet people, and Chris and I met each other. I still have Chris's business card from way back then, and a couple other names that you might see on my LinkedIn from time to time. A guy named Mike Faber, and a dear friend, Chris Hardy. I met some great people. Don't get me wrong. but that's how Chris and I met. And because of another friend that's been on this podcast, Brett Zachman, but my friends call me Zach. It just cracks me up when I say that. I crack myself up. But Chris and I are also part of the B Men organization that Brett runs. And a couple months ago, on the monthly Zoom call, the monthly get-together, the virtual get-together, Chris mentioned he had a new book out. And I'm like, on Zoom and using the little chat thing, and I'm saying, Chris, come on the podcast. I would love to have you. So here we are. Chris is a martial arts guru. Something else I learned that we have in common, I find out we have a lot of things in common. He went to college at Northwestern University, which is in Evanston, Illinois, which is near where I grew up. We had that in common. I took Taekwondo as a kid as well. It was just a fun interview. And we talk a lot about leadership. We talk about using leadership in the parenting world. The time when Chris was opening up his karate school and he had a little bit of a panic attack, and his former wife was going to make him sit down and tell his boys that Daddy was going to quit, not open the business because he had his little panic attack. A great story. Get to learn about mentorship and his mentor, Grandmaster Lee. And oh my, you're going to learn some new words. I'm not even going to try and pronounce them. I'm looking at my notes, and I'm not even going to try and pronounce some of these words. Okay, so there you go. One thing I want to mention that we did talk about, what Chris calls his 6 M's, and I will put this in the show notes, the 6 M's. Meditation, mind treatment, mental imaging, movement, motivation, and oh my gosh, I can't read this one. Oh, crud. Well, I'll have to listen back and put the sixth M in there. Well, this will give you a reason to listen. 6 M's. All right. Chris Natzke. And in the show notes, you will find how to get a hold of him, including on LinkedIn. So the way you spell Chris's last name is Natzke. Natzke. And he's on LinkedIn all the time. So there you go. All right. I think that's about it, really. Let me have another sip of water before we get to the end. There we go. All right. Well, that's it, everybody. Author, speaker, leadership coach, Chris Natzke is going to talk to you about the 6 M's, and hopefully I'll remember what the 6 M was, but anywho. So there you go. I hope you have a great day. I hope you are staying safe, wearing a mask. Please wash your hands after listening to this episode. And as our good friend Terry Crews would say, your success is my success.
How long is the show?
Long form, so we go up to an hour.
Okay, great.
So you ready for your first question?
I'm ready for my first question.
All right. The first question is, do you remember where we met?
I do not. Obviously we have connected with B Men, but I think you had reminded me that we had met in person before that. Is that correct?
So I've been trying to rack my brain,
Yeah.
and I have a very small brain anyway. You're the karate guy. I played years of hockey, so as a goalie, so a lot of pucks to the head. So
Yeah.
We met at the local chapter of the National Speakers Association in Denver.
Got it.
Um, I believe it was the first time I'd ever attended. You were one of the few people that I just I'm very bad at networking because I'm such an introvert
Okay. Okay.
that I don't like crowds,
Yeah. Yeah.
but I knew that I wanted to, meet some wonderful people such as yourself. I met you. I met Mike Faber,
Okay.
Chris Hardy.
Uh-huh.
I mean, uh, and I still have your card somewhere in this house.
Really? Oh, that's
Yeah,
fun.
yeah.
Awesome. Have you been back to NSA? I mean, obviously we haven't had any live meetings, but have you been
I
back?
I have not.
Yeah.
I have not. Um, yeah, but that's how we met,
Oh,
and
okay.
that's why I'm excited because, like you said, we've connected through B Men, through
Yeah.
um, Brett Zachman, but my friends call me Zach.
Right.
I, I have to make fun of him every time I say that. However, I this is something that I know you, but I don't know you. If that
Sure.
makes sense, and
Yeah,
that's why
absolutely.
I'm excited because not only do I get to share your knowledge with the listeners, but I get to learn as a listener more about Chris Natzke.
Right on.
Um, and here's something else we have in common.
Okay.
I, as a young lad back in the burbs of Chicago,
Uh-huh.
I took Taekwondo.
Oh, very good. Who did you take it with? Do you recall?
I don't recall. I
Okay.
mean,
Where in the suburbs?
where was class? Class was in Deerfield, Illinois.
Sure, I know it well. I grew
Went to
up in
Northwestern.
That's right. And when I started, and I grew up in near Milwaukee, 30 miles west of Milwaukee. But the reason I know Deerfield so well is when I started my career right out of college, I worked for Procter and Gamble, and
Okay.
my sales territory was from the Wisconsin border all the way to the northern tip of Chicago. So I was in Deerfield a couple times a month.
Wow.
Yeah,
Yeah, when I saw Northwestern, I'm like, Evanston, right? Is that where
Evanston.
North?
Yep.
That's where Northwestern. Yeah,
Mhm.
some great. I mean, besides yourself, some great people have come out of Northwestern.
Yeah.
Michael Wilbon,
Yes,
one of my
exactly.
favorite sports writers. Uh, are you familiar with Sean Evans?
No, Sean Evans. Who's Sean Evans?
Sean Evans has this awesome. I don't know what to call it other than a talk show on YouTube. Uh, what's it called? He Oh, it's going to drive me nuts. But his talk show is uh, he and a guest sit there face to face eating hot wings.
All right.
And he just asks some great questions,
Yeah.
probably because he came from Northwestern.
Yeah, right on. Well, Julia Louis-Dreyfus,
Yes.
Stephen Colbert, Charlton Heston, Anne Margaret. So yeah, there's a lot of people that have come through there. Hmm.
So how did you become so fascinated with karate?
Yeah, yeah. So great question, and I love sharing this story. I, this is part of my keynote too when I shared, but I started martial art training back in 1973. I was a short little chubby kid, and I was enamored with a TV show that some of your more seasoned listeners will remember called Kung Fu.
Oh yeah, it's coming back, by the way.
Yeah, oh, is it? Oh, is it really?
Yes.
Oh, I'll have to look that up. So Kwai Chang Cain's doing his thing, moving across the American desert, beating up the bad guys. And
Yep.
when you're 10 years old, you think it's the coolest thing you've ever seen. And I literally begged my mom to let me go to my first class. And when I did, I saw these people doing these movements, these powerful stances and strikes. And I literally felt like I came home. Um, and then about 3 years after that, I met a man who changed my life forever. And he's still my instructor to this day. His name is Grandmaster J.K. Lee. He's in the Milwaukee area. And I had been already training for about 3 years at that point, but he had just moved from South Korea, and I was in his class for the first time, and I was sitting in the back of the room with my legs spread wide. I was stretching out, getting ready for the class to start, and he walked onto the mat like he always did. He has this amazing presence about him, right? And he's surveying all the students, and pretty soon I realized he's staring directly at me.
Hmm.
And before I could move a muscle, he came over and he sat down in front of me. And I remember my legs were spread, and he puts his feet on both inside of both my legs, and he grabs the end of my belt, and with one push pull, he splits me out to 180 degrees. And I like to joke. I learned 2 lessons that day. Is number one is anyone can do the splits once.
Yeah.
But the second thing, which was life changing for me, Tommy, is he looked at me deep in the eyes and he said to me in his broken English, he said, "I will make you a champion. I will make you a champion." And literally, I just, this fireworks started going off, and I flew home telling my parents what he had said. But what I've realized, there was one time in my life where I had a man that I really admired. He was strong. He was powerful, but he's also very kind. But he basically called out my greatness, and he claimed it for me. And that to me was a life-changing, seminal moment in my life.
Why do you think he picked you?
I don't know. I mean, maybe I had some physical talent to begin with, but for whatever reason, he did. And he was like my angel, because what I realized is, when you're 13, you're thinking about medals and trophies. But what I realized later on, as I got a little bit older, a little wiser, even though I had, success in the tournament ring and whatever, is that he was helping me know the value of becoming a champion in life, right? And he became like my second father, and someone who to this day I just absolutely love and adore, and just has changed thousands of lives in the last 30, 40 years he's been in the United States. So that to me was the seminal moment. And that's where I really began my quest in earnest of being proficient in martial arts, and also one day wanting to teach and give those same gifts back to others.
And that's a great point too, is that you learn that it wasn't about the trophies and the medals. It was something about more of learning life lessons. And I go back to when I used to coach hockey, and I had my first meeting with the parents, and I let the parents know, this isn't about hockey. This is about, we're going to teach your kids how to be good citizens, how to win, how to lose, and I think that's the greatest thing about extracurricular activities, is because it's not about learning how to play the violin. It's not learning about, how to play soccer. There's more to it. And if you can get somebody in your situation, your what's another, trying to think of the karate person that he's not really he's your coach, but there's a
Yeah. We in the Japanese they would call it sensei.
There you go.
In Korean martial arts, Taekwondo, which is what I practice, we call it sabum nim.
Ooh, sabum nim.
Sabum nim. And in fact, I have a beautiful story. I love sharing the story.
Sabum nim.
Sabum, Sabum, and then Nim, and it basically means honored instructor. And one of my favorite stories about Grandmaster Lee growing up is, he came over to the United States at about 35, 36 years old, and English was not his native tongue. So people had a very difficult time understanding him, but I could always understand him perfectly. I to this day, I don't know why, but I can always understand him. And so anyway, he had a bunch of us after a class. He was talking to us, and pretty soon everybody started filtering out, and it was just he and I. And I was about 14 or 15 at the time. I'd already gotten my junior black belt. And, sometimes as kids, we ask questions that we already know the answer to, I think, as a way of testing, adults. And so I already knew the answer to this, but I looked at him and I said, it was just he and I said, "Sir, what does sabum nim mean?" And he paused, and then he looked at me like directly in the eyes, and he said, Sabum Nim means father. And I was like, I mean, my heart, I tell that story now, my heart starts to rattle, right?
Mm-hmm.
And what I got from that, and this is my own interpretation, obviously, but he wasn't trying to replace my dad. But what he was doing is he was saying, I'm here for you in that way. And if you choose this path at any time, you need to be able to play that role as well. And I always just took that at heart. And that was another life-changing seminal moment with him, because it was just like this crystallization of, this bond that we had. Sabum Nim means father. Yeah, it's always been great for me.
So what lessons did you learn as a young man with Grandmaster Lee that helped you develop who Chris Natzke is today?
Yeah. I think probably one of the main things is, I grew up in a household where my father, God bless him, was an alcoholic. And so there was a lot of turmoil in my nuclear family. Didn't know who I was going to come home to. My father could be coming home and whistling Dixie and so happy at one point, and then the next he could turn on a dime and be very, very abusive. And so I didn't have that consistency growing up. But with Grandmaster Lee, I had someone that was always solid and consistent. And the other thing that I learned from him is that this beautiful combination of power and compassion. So he, more than anyone that I ever learned, any male role model growing up, had this immense, obviously, physical ability. He was a high-ranking black belt, and had been training his whole life, and could be a real badass. Excuse but he could, right? And at
Right.
the same time, he had this great compassion of wanting to help people. And I just saw so many instances of him, talking with someone and encouraging someone. If someone had an emotional problem, if someone had a physical problem, that he would take the time to work with them. So I had that role model in me very early in my life. And that's probably one of the biggest things that I've kept with me. It's like, was it Peter Parker? With great strength comes great responsibility,
Oh,
right?
right.
Yeah.
Spider-Man.
Spider-Man, exactly. And
Yeah.
that's kind of what I saw, is he had this great strength. And in fact, if your listeners want to get a vision of him, when I was probably a senior in high school, freshman in college, when the first Karate Kid came out. And everybody knows Mr. Miyagi, right?
Right.
I remember crying in the theater because Mr. Miyagi reminded me so much of Grandmaster Lee. That's what he was like and still is, you know? So anyway, that was the biggest thing I learned from him, is that beautiful combination of power, strength, and compassion and kindness.
And Chris, we're definitely gonna talk about the your new book. But one thing, which is breakthrough, 3 winning strategies to create breakthrough results in your life, business, and relationships. But would you say, because you were talking about having a sales career before getting into martial arts, and one of the things I found out, you owned a martial arts studio. Would you say that because of the discipline of taekwondo, of karate, was that something that helped you after seeing that 10 years of working in sales, that you were going to take a leap of faith and start your own business?
Oh, it was huge. It was huge. And, because I mean, I'm not overstating that martial arts has impacted every area of my life. But what I found from that, I didn't have any role models growing up of someone owning their own business. I mean, my father was a printer, my mother was a nurse. I was the first person on my mom's side of the family to even go to college. And so there were not a lot of role models. And my movement from going in the corporate world, which, by the way, I had an amazing experience working for Procter & Gamble. Amazing people, amazing products, amazing training. I have nothing but affection for those years. And I knew that there was something more that I wanted to do. And one of the things that I found in opening my own business, which I did in 1995, is it was, number one, it was one of the most exciting times of my life, but it was also one of the most petrifying times in my life, right? I was married at the time, had two small boys. I guess our boys were 10 and 6 years old. I was the sole breadwinner of the family, and now I'm going off to do this thing. And my wife at the time was incredibly supportive of that decision. So I feel very, very blessed with that. But I didn't, as much as I had all the confidence of being a martial arts instructor, athlete, et cetera, I did not have the confidence that I could make this happen. We all have limiting beliefs, and I was up against it when I first, before I even opened it, I started getting panic attacks.
Wow.
One of the most debilitating things I've ever experienced. So much so that one day I had it so bad that the short version of the story is I checked, my wife at the time checked me into the hospital, and I spent the night in the emergency room at Swedish Hospital in Denver. And they told me that if I wouldn't have been such a well-conditioned athlete, I would have gone into cardiac arrest.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So when people say, oh, it was easy for you, it's you don't understand. No, I understand. I understand what it's like to be curled up in my minister's office in the fetal position, because I was so petrified of, in that time, when you're in that, you become irrational. I'm thinking at 33 years old, if this business venture fails, I'm done. I look back at it now and he's laughing at myself, but it was real then. It was so real. And that martial arts, the lessons that I learned, we have a saying in Korean martial arts. It's in Korean, it's called Pilsung, Pilsung, and it basically roughly translates to certain victory. So it's about taking those steps and just leaning into it as uncomfortable as it can be, and knowing that you're going to be successful on the other side. It's just like that is the way you lean into it. Now, when I went through that, there was a lot of, hey, I'm supposed to know all this already, be able to get through it. And I wasn't able to, but eventually when I worked through it, that became, again, certainly one of my standbys to get through that. And then when I finally opened the school, it totally prospered. And it was, I look back at it now, so what was I worried about? Right. But
oh yeah,
it was very real. It was very real.
Well, that's where I am going through my own transformation, so to speak, with learning about the Stoics.
Mm-hmm.
And the book I have through one of my mentors who gave this to me is Ryan Holiday's book,
Sure.
Daily Stoic. And
Yep.
so, one of the things that the Stoics talk about is we put worst case scenario in our mind, but when it comes to reality, that's not how it happens.
Right. And the other thing too, and maybe I'm just speaking for myself, but I think I've seen other people go through it, look at it this way, and also my coaching clients, is we think we have to do everything all at once. And generally speaking, if we're moving in the right direction and we're just very consistent, not only in our mindset, but our action steps, good things will begin to unfurl themselves, particularly if we're on the right path for ourselves. When I look back at it, I was doing well. I was successful in the corporate world selling shampoo and deodorant, right? but that's not what I felt I was in this world to do.
Right.
And teaching its leadership principles is what was part of my, my dharma, if you will. And it was like, man, as soon as I said yes to that, that's when the door started to open. I had 40 to 50 students at my kids' grade school. I moved them over when I first opened the studio to our commercial location. Within a year, I had 200 students. Within 5 years, we had 500 students at one location. And my marketing was awful. I mean, there's so many mistakes I made, but the momentum of being on purpose and really having that power, the powerful vision for what I wanted to create. When I got out of my own way, that's when things started to unfold.
Oh my gosh. You're saying so many beautiful things right now, Chris, because I had a conversation, my first meeting this morning with a gentleman, Darren Palmer, who runs a self-publishing company, and hopefully we're going to do some things together. And my very similar thought process to him was, I'm not living my purpose right now. And I feel that a lot of us play that safe zone. So Chris, you could have stayed at Procter and Gamble. You could have stayed and be a successful salesperson and, make, 10 million a year. But you understood, and you got to witness, somebody like Grandmaster Lee, that they had a different purpose. They knew their purpose, and you taking um, that journey to say there's something else, there's something better. As a parent, this is where having our kids be able to fail and learn from those failures is so key. And here you are, curled up in a ball, knowing that it's either make or break, and you took that gamble, and at the end of the day, you were successful.
Well, I'll tell you what, I love the fact that you mentioned our children. I have two boys, as I mentioned. They're both grown now. But if I could indulge you with a story, this is another one of the
Please.
seminal moments. So I'm getting ready to open up the school, my martial arts school. This is back in 1995. And I have not yet left my corporate job. And only one person in the organization knows that I'm going to be leaving. I've only told one person, one of my best friends in the company. And so now Friday I get off work and I'm driving home. But before I go home, I go to the new location that we've already signed the lease on. And my wife at the time is there. She's like general contractor. So, imagine you walk in, she's got the clipboard and the guys they're on the rotation, the circular saw, and they're framing out the doors, whatever. And I walk in, Tommy, and I have a total panic attack, a total meltdown. And I go to her, I go, this is ridiculous. This is the worst idea I've ever had. We got to get out of this. This is stupid. It's bound to fail. I was so stupid to do this. I'm going to call the attorney on Monday. I'm going to get out of this lease. And she's looking at me like, what planet are you from? So finally she tells me, she says, just go home. Now, she used some more language around, but I won't share. And she goes, we'll talk about it after dinner. So I go home and I make dinner that night, and we get done cleaning up after dinner, and we're getting ready to sit down. And I've already formulated my case, right? I've already got all the key points as to why we're going to get out of this stupid idea. So we sit down and I'm rattling off all these points, and she's listening very intently. And then she says, okay, thanks for sharing that. She said, I very much supported you getting into this venture. And if you want to get out, I will support you with that as well. I just have one request. And I said, well, that's fair. What's your request? She goes, my one request is that you sit our two sons down and you tell them why you are choosing not to go for your dream.
Oh,
yeah, right.
Wow.
I mean, direct hit, sunk my battleship, buddy. and I couldn't have that conversation. So that was another turning point where I was like, oh my gosh, there's a bigger why here than just me, doing this thing I've always wanted to do. This is also, there's a lineage here. I'm a role model for my sons. And if this thing crashes and burns, at least I went out swinging, right?
Exactly.
And it was just such a profound thing for her to say, and just so blessed that she did that. And, and I've had those conversations since with my boys. And I know how that experience growing up at that school positively impacted them. So anyway, I'm so glad you brought up kids, because if anyone is out there listening and they're saying, man, I've got all these, responsibilities and these expenses, I can't go for my dream. I got to take care of my kids. I'm here to tell you my experience is it was the best thing I ever did, not only for myself, but also for my kids.
And it's hard. It's hard to be that role model to our kids, knowing that deep down we're scared. And I mean, how do you convey that to your kids other than just say to them, hey, dad's leaving his steady day job to create something that he wants to do. And I go back to, we need to show our kids how to fail,
Absolutely.
because I mean, I mean, it's a great. You bring up a great example. What in? Well, I hate playing this game, but we'll have to play it. Is what if
Oh,
you did sit down your boys and say, "Yeah, Dad's not going to open up the dojo."
yeah.
I mean,
Oh,
how would that have impacted them going forward? Going, oh, well, if Dad can quit, I can quit.
oh my gosh. So, I mean, you say that and I cringe. You know, it's just like I can't even imagine having that conversation. And quite honestly, if someone wouldn't have woken me up, I probably would have had that conversation at the time. So what a blessing that I didn't. But yeah, I mean, and I don't know if they still, you know, I know that they remember that experience. I don't in terms of opening up the school and growing up there, and when I don't know if they remember me going through the hard times, but at the same time, I think it's really important for our kids to see us when we're challenged and come out on the other side. I think when we hide it from our kids, quite honestly, when we're going through emotional difficulties, etc., they know it anyway. They may not know it consciously, but they pick up on it subconsciously. And so, you know, I think that showing that vulnerability and showing the courage to move through that is one of the greatest things we can do for our kids.
You know, I think that's a great segue, because I want to talk about your newest book. How many books have you written so far, Chris?
This is my second book. My second book.
Good for you. Good for you. Breakthrough: 3 winning strategies to create breakthrough results in your life, business, and relationships. And going through um, some of the information on Amazon, one of the things that really struck out to me, because I'm really bad at this, Chris. If gold medals could be given for procrastination, I'd be a gold medalist all around. Because one of the things for me is doing things or procrastinating things I don't want to do, which, that's what procrastination is. There's something we don't want to do. For me right now, I am extremely behind in something you might be able to relate to: expense reports.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
So I know I'm not the only one out there when it comes to procrastination. Help me, Obi-Wan Kenobi. Help me, help you, help our audience. Talk to us about being better, or eliminating maybe procrastination.
Well, hey, I thank you for asking that question. I think that we all go through elements of that in our lives. I guess the best thing, and I do this with anyone that I do life coaching work with, is I think what really, and in fact, it's one of the chapters in the book. What many of us do when we have something that we want to impart or partake in, and maybe it's a big, hairy, audacious goal, maybe it's even something small like your expense reports. What we do is we look at it in its absolute, in its full finished structure. And when you do that, it can seem very, very overwhelming, right? It's like this huge thing, this huge project in front of us. And one of the things I think that can really serve us all is when we have something big is to break it down, right? In the chapter in the book is called Begin with the End in Mind, then Break It Down. And so take those big, hairy, audacious goals that we have and break them down into small, digestible chunks, and then be consistent in the action that we take. So, consistent action in my mind isn't doing it 1 week and then you wait 3 months and you do it again. It's like plan it in your calendar, right? And each and every day, whether it's 5 minutes or 15 minutes or 30 minutes, whatever, because when you do things and you take even small, consistent action over a period of time, those results don't add up, they compound, right? I just want to say that again. Those small efforts that we take consistently, they don't add up, they compound. And so that's why, you see it in the way when people eat well, and when they work out, when they're reading, when they're trying to expand their knowledge, whatever, it's that consistent effort over time. We say in martial arts is that a black belt is a white belt that never quit.
Mm.
See, and that black
Yeah.
belt didn't get to black belt because he or she just showed up one day. 3 years or more, they showed up for 3 times a week and took a 1 hour class, and they practiced at home, and they did all the things they needed to do, but it was a consistent effort. And so break it down, begin with the end in mind, break it down, and then commit yourself to consistent action.
One of the things I just read last week, there were like 10 words that Warren Buffett recommends. And one of the words that pops up from your book is vision.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Tell me more about clarifying your vision. What does that mean?
Well, it was one of my favorite topics because I think that many times we can get caught on this wheel of activity. You know, they say we're human beings, but most of us can live life as human doings, right? And so we're just so focused on getting the next project done and getting the next thing checked off, or the things we need to get off our to-do list, et cetera. And we don't take time to really dream and to really think about where we want to go. And I mean, when we're all kids, when we were growing up, we had oodles of dreams and things that we wanted to accomplish. But when we get into adulthood, if you will, and we get practical, a lot of those can go away. But what I know in my heart is when we get really clear on a vision and we're really clear about why that vision is important to us. Think back to my story about having to tell my kids I was either going to stay and do the school or I was going to not. That why for me was part of my why was making that great example for them. When we get really clear about our vision and then we're clear about why, now all of a sudden, when problems come, we have the resiliency. We have a direction, we have a path. It may turn out very differently from the way that we saw it, but what it does is it gets us moving in that direction, and it gives us something that each and every day when we wake up that we're working toward. And I have a very, very firm belief. I think the highest degree of happiness that we have in our lives doesn't come as a result of everything being perfect in our lives. It comes as a result of us feeling that we're on purpose and we're working towards something.
A journey,
A vision, something we're working toward. That's when we're the happiest. We're in this creative mode of creating something that's bigger than us or something that comes from our heart. And when we get clear on that with that vision, now we have a direction to move toward. And so, that's one of the first questions when I do life coaching with someone is we do a lot of work on what is your vision?
mm-hmm.
In many aspects of their lives. I do an exercise where they go through 8 major aspects of their lives. And I say, let's see where you're at today. And now what's your vision? And now what's the gap? And so where's this gap? And what I find, Tommy, is that many times that gap has a consistency through among all areas of their life. So one of my thoughts is that how we show up in one area is how we show up in most areas of our lives. Right? And if we get momentum, we get traction, we have a victory in one, it has a tendency to do the domino effect in other areas of our lives as well.
Well, one of the things that came to mind is, one of the things that unfortunately as adults, we do focus too much on the negative. Okay. And for example, 2 weekends ago, my son's hockey team, one of the hockey teams he plays for, they had their end of season tournament. So they had a game Friday, and it was you win, you move on. All right. They won. They had their next game. So that game was like at 4:45, I think. You win that game, then you play at 8:30 that night. They won that game. Because they won those 2 games, now they're in a championship.
Yeah.
The journey. Go to the championship. Lose. And unfortunately, those kids lost sight of the journey. Yeah. We as adults, to use the corporate sales world, We go out to get that client, and we wine and dine that client, and we don't get the client.
Mhm.
But it's part of the journey. It's part of, like you're saying, the vision.
Mhm. Mhm. Well, you bring up two things I'd love to share with you on what you just brought up, because I think it's so important. I think that most of us have much greater clarity on what we don't want versus what we do want. And
True.
in fact, it's one of the first chapter of the book when I'm helping people develop their vision. There are a series of questions, and I've learned this just from my coaching with people. Is when I ask them, what's your vision? What do you want? It's many people have such a difficult time articulating that. So what I generally ask now is, what don't you want to have happen? What's going on that you're not happy with? Oh man, then they're on a roll. I'm like, okay, great, we got that on the table. How can we now flip that around to what you do want? Do you see the finesse in that? And now all of a sudden the clarity happens, because they're like, oh wow, yeah, I know what I don't want. If I don't want to be ill and maybe not live to see my daughter's wedding day, right? Because my health
Right.
is bad, man, then what I do want is I want health and wellness. And what do I have to do to make that happen? But, and I really struggled with that initially, but I realized that most people, Tony Robbins says this, most people are motivated by pain or pleasure, right? We're either trying to avoid pain or we're trying to gain pleasure. And in my work over the last several years as being a coach, I found most people are much more clear about the pain they want to avoid. So once you start there, now you can develop the vision from that point. And the second thing is I was blessed in 1999. I won the national taekwondo championships for the United States. But what I don't share, and I probably could share more, is in 1998 I came in second. and I actually, in my opinion, fought better in 98. I was like mowing through my competition, and I got to the finals. And I remember my coach telling me, hey, that semifinal match you had, that was your toughest match. This guy you got coming up in the finals, he's nowhere close to that. And my concentration waned and I lost the match. Didn't get hurt. It was full contact fighting. He didn't like beat me up, but he outpointed me, right? Now, the thing that's beautiful about that is 99 probably wouldn't have been as possible as it was when I won if I wouldn't have had that experience in 98, as painful as it was.
I think Seinfeld calls second place, first place loser.
That's right. That's right. I've heard that bit. And what's interesting is when I heard that, it was after I lost, and I'm like, yeah, that's about right. That's about right.
I want to talk about flipping other things. Not hold on, not a karate flip, but flipping the what we don't want to what we do want. And one of the exercises, um, and if you want to steal this from me, Chris, go for it. But one of the things I've done in the past with past coaching clients is, again, talking about what you don't want. Okay. So one of the exercises I have them do is write down like on average, your daily schedule.
Okay.
Time you get up, time if it's a, 9 to 5, what time you take your first break, lunch, all that good stuff. Take that same piece of paper, flip it over, write down the schedule you do want.
Mm-hmm.
Because again, they start seeing clarity. They start seeing what they don't want and what they do want, and hopefully start striving for the things they do want, and they can put the rest in the mirror.
Absolutely. I love that. I'm making a note of this right now. And what's so also cool about that is, like one of my teachers told me years ago, awareness is the first step in transformation, right? And so when you do those, you might say, I have no time, and then have them do a time log for a week.
Yes.
And realize how much time is actually wasted, because we've become unconscious to it. And being able to do that's like, oh my gosh, now that's my awareness. Okay, great. Now you can start to transform. If you don't know that there's a difficulty, if you don't know there's a problem with it, you're probably just going to keep going, because even if it's uncomfortable, it's familiar to you. And we have a tendency to want to stay familiar.
What are some daily habits? Because we're talking, I think we've got some great context, but what daily habits can you share with the audience to help them to achieve, a vision where they're doing what they love to be doing, if that makes sense?
Oh my gosh. Well, I'm sitting here smiling as you're asking that question because I actually have a chapter devoted or section devoted to this in Breaking Through. And I'm a huge proponent of starting off our days with a real powerful base. I think that, if you think about it this way, what is the time of day that we have the greatest amount of our control of our day? And it's basically first thing in the morning when we wake up and probably,
Correct.
30 minutes before we go to bed and all that stuff in between. And if you don't think that's the case, think about a time that you really wanted to do a specific activity. Maybe it was working out, maybe it was going for a walk, maybe it was whatever it's going to be. And then the day got away from you and you kept pushing it back. And then at the end of the day, it didn't get done. So I love the mornings, and I've been doing this practice now probably for, probably about 8 years. And I've created what I call the 6 M's of morning mastery. And this is the way I start the first hour of every day. And and when I say this, I do 6 of these practices. Someone hearing this might say, I'm going to start with 2. That's absolutely fine. But it's about being consistent. And the first thing I do is I start every day with a 20-minute meditation. So I just get clear. I mean, I've just woken up. My mind is relatively clear as well. And I just spend some time in silence. So that's the first M, is meditation. Number 2 is what I call mind treatment. So I'm setting my intentions during for what I want. I have positive affirmations that I'm reciting. I'm basically, with a clean slate after my meditative practice, I'm implanting positive thoughts into my mind. Then number 3 is what I call mental imaging. And that's where I'm not only visualizing what I want to create that day, I'm also doing it with a lot of feeling, because that's when it resonates in our psyche. And I had a teacher tell me years ago, he said, Chris, if you're going to fantasize, you might as well win, right?
I
But
like that.
right, but most of us don't do that, right? And I myself, I have to always check myself, because it's easy for me to get into worry and fear. But what do you want it to look like? Well, now lean into that. And then the final 3 practices, number 4 is movement, doing some sort of movement. And note, I didn't say exercise. I said movement.
Mm-hmm.
Walk, yoga, stretching, calisthenics, whatever. Our bodies were designed to move. And there are places in the world called blue zones. I wasn't aware of this until about 5 years ago. These are places where people that live routinely into their 90s and their hundreds. Now, they eat good diets and they're part of community, but the one thing they do is they move every day. And we don't do that in our society. And then wrapping up is motivation. I'll read or I'll listen to audiobooks that are motivating to me. And then the final M is memoirs. So I take time for journaling.
Oh yeah.
What's time. So those are the 6 M's, meditation, mind treatment, mental imaging, movement, motivation, and memoirs. And if I were to say anything to your listeners, those are great foundational practices to make sure you're ready for the day, because great days lead into great weeks, which lead to great months, which lead to great years, which lead to great lifetimes. But it all starts, I think, with a consistent daily practice.
Yeah, I call it bookending your day. So
Yes.
exactly, you start, like for me. So right now, reading the Daily Stoic. So that's how I start my day. I end my day by reading. I've got other books going on,
Yeah.
but you are so right, Chris. You you start your day in a positive way, and that carries so much throughout your day, and like you were saying, throughout your week, throughout your months, throughout your years.
Exactly. And it goes back to that same concept that those habits don't add up, they compound. So now
Mm-hmm.
all of a sudden, these become basic ways that we just approach life. They become habit. Like I do my meditation down in one of the bedrooms in my house. It's like I just automatically get up and start walking downstairs in the morning, right? I don't think about it. In fact, that's another thing that I tell people when I'm working with my clients is, if you have activities and habits that you want to develop, do what I call pre-committing. So set them up for success so that they're super easy to do. So like, for instance, if you want to get up in the morning and do a walk or a run, don't make the decision when you're in bed and the alarm goes off and you're in those comfy, those comfy covers and you don't want to, I'll do it in a half an hour. No, when the alarm goes off, already have your workout clothes and your running shoes or your walking shoes right at the end of your bed so that they're there. And you just put them on and make your first commitment is just to put on those clothes. And once you put on those clothes, then your first commitment in this case would be to just walk outside. Well, now you're in momentum. Now you're ready to follow up. But if you're making that decision from a disempowered place, meaning you're laying on your back, when you hit the snooze control, the snooze button, it's probably not going to happen.
Or when you go to bed at night, just have your running gear, walking gear already on, including your shoes.
Yeah, you could do that too. Yeah, I've heard of people that do that. I've never taken it that far, but I have heard that.
I've heard the clothing, but I haven't heard anybody put their shoes on.
Yeah, I love it.
Especially if you have a significant other and you end up kicking them with your shoes on.
Right. Right.
Somebody's going to end up on the couch.
There you go.
What does taking inspired action mean to you, Chris?
Yeah. Well, it all kind of goes full circle with that vision, right? Because I love the distinction of motivation versus inspiration. And I heard this from Deepak Chopra. He was telling a story years ago. He was being interviewed and he was talking about when, I'm sorry, I need to correct. It was Jack Canfield that told this story about Deepak Chopra and him. And it was when the Chicken Soup for the Soul books first came out. And they were being interviewed on a morning show, I think it was on ABC, and they were being split screened. And the moderator said to Chopra, Dr. Chopra, does Jack Canfield motivate you? And he said, no, he does not. And now Canfield starts sweating, right? He's like, here I am on national television, and I think I just got thrown under the bus by Deepak Chopra. And then immediately after that, Chopra says this. He says, he does not motivate me. He inspires me. You see, motivating is getting someone to do something in a very short period of time because you're yelling at them or you're encouraging them. He said, but what inspiration does is it lights a fire inside of you that stays lit. And Jack Canfield inspires me.
I'm going to piggyback because I've heard Zig Ziglar talk about, just because you go when he was still alive, just because you go to one of his events and, you get pumped up and you get motivated. And I think Tony Robbins talks about this too, is it's up to you to stay motivated. You can't just keep going to, a Tony Robbins event, a Jack Canfield event. You have to stay motivated. One thing Zig Ziglar talked about is, as far as motivation goes, we'll grab, some kind of motivational book or audio book or something when we're down, but it's like eating good nutrition every day. And that's right. Where you need, and to go back to your 6 M's, you need to feed your mind on a daily basis, not just when you're having a bad day. And it goes back to what you were saying, Chris, and that is, if you start your day in a positive way, it's going to carry into your weeks or months or your years.
Absolutely. And to the point we were talking about before about the importance of vision, that's the inspiration for me. I get inspired by a vision. And so when we hold that vision and we get clarity on that, and then the other thing too is commitment to act regardless of how we're quote unquote feeling. I once had a teacher tell me, Chris, what does feeling have to do with it? You either made a choice that you're going to do this or you didn't. Now, if you've made the choice, you need to go for it. And here's what I found, Tommy, is that, and I think you've probably had this experience as well as many listeners, many times when we don't want to do something, but we're committed to taking that first step and we get a momentum, pretty soon all that resistance starts to go away and we're in it. I mean, when I was training for national championships, there were definitely days I didn't want to work out. Trust me, there were definitely days I didn't want to go work out. And what I found is oftentimes on those days when I had committed to doing it anyway and took the action, those ended up being some of my best and most productive workouts. I don't know why, but it was just like, what's the next step? What have you committed to doing? Because that then builds the momentum. And I think, and the other thing I would tell people is start small.
Mm-hmm.
Starts with small, consistent efforts so that you start to trust yourself. Because where we get ourselves in trouble is we have this huge thing we want to take. We're going to go to the gym for 2 hours every day after being sedentary for 4 years. And it lasts for 2 or 3 days and we can't even get out of a chair because we're so sore. And then we stop and we regress back not only to where we were, but sometimes worse than where we were before in terms of inactivity. And then our psyche goes, well, man, I can't even be trusted. Every time I tell myself I do this, I never follow through. But what if we took something small and we just committed to it each and every day? And now we start to build our confidence. And then we add on from there. Now it's kind of like you can't do 5 push-ups, but now you can because you do 5 every day. Now you can go to 10. And then pretty soon it just grows exponentially.
All right. So looking back at some of the things you've done, eighth degree black belt. You might have been an 8th degree black belt in 8th grade. I don't know. But one of the things I found, and I'm trying, where's my notes on this? Oh, where is it? I have to ask you. Oh, your big journey. The 500-mile walk. Because you are somebody that, oh, here it is, the Camino de Santiago.
Yeah, the Camino de Santiago.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Yes. Yeah.
Am I correct? It was a 500-mile walk.
Yeah.
So here, the title of your book, Breakthrough. How do you, first prepare for something like that, Chris, but going through that day after day, those 500 miles, how did you keep your sanity? How did you just, break through those, the runners talk about the wall, hitting that wall. How did you break through the wall and say, I'm going to find a taxi and go back home?
Well, yes, I hear what you're saying. So first of all, the Camino de Santiago, for your listeners that may not have heard about it, it's sometimes just known as the Camino, is a 500-mile walk across northern Spain. Started probably in the 12th century, I believe, where the church, initially it was a penance. So Santiago is Saint James, who is reputed to have brought Christianity to Europe. And so what pilgrims would do is they would make this pilgrimage to Santiago as a means of penance. Now, I didn't do it necessarily as a religious thing. I did it as a spiritual and transformational practice. And I had heard about it about 15 years before I had done it. And it's kind of a great story. I have a very good friend of mine, and he and I were out to lunch one day in mid-February, and he was showing me his bucket list on his phone. And so, yeah, I'm going to do this, and this year I'm going to climb Kilimanjaro, and I'm like, wow, that's impressive. He goes, what's on your bucket list? And he goes, I bet it's that walk you've always told me about. I said, yeah, I'd have to say that the Camino is top of my list. He goes, well, why don't you do it? I said, you know what? One day I will definitely walk that Camino. He goes, no, how about this year? And like any good friend, he would not let me off the hook.
Right.
So I was like, okay, I committed to go speak to someone about it. I started studying about it. Well, anyway, needless to say, that was mid-February, and May 4th of that same year, I was walking up the side of the Pyrenees Mountains in France.
What year was this, Chris?
This was 2014.
Oh, it's not too far.
Oh, no, it's like 6 years ago, right? And so anyway, the most beautiful lessons about the Camino, it's like anything I've been talking about so far, is it is just about that consistent effort. And they say the way you do the Camino is the way you generally do life. So I have to admit, somewhat embarrassingly, that I did the first 2 weeks it took me 29 days to do it. my first 2 weeks, I treat it as an athletic event, right? Up at 5 o'clock in the morning on the trail before sunrise. Can I get my, 17, 18 miles in, so on and so forth. And then I had several instances because you not only have much time alone to just reflect on your life and where you want to go, that's really the main reason I went. But then you also meet people from all over the world, literally all over the world. And you'll walk with someone. You walk 2 hours with someone and have this incredible, beautiful conversation, and then never see him again. And I had an instance that happened that totally changed my perspective. And then the last 2 weeks, I really slowed down, and I took my time to visit, and I took my time, walking from one destination to the next. And that's when the lessons just started to pour out. So, if anyone has an interest, there's a beautiful movie called The Way. That's what the Camino means in Spanish. It means the way, with Martin Sheen and Emilio Estevez, his son. And it was life-changing. It was absolutely life-changing to do that walk. One of the best things I've ever done in my life.
Is there a book in it? You're going
There
to write a
are,
book about it?
what? There are, because I have several stories. I'll just share one with you right now. That the last 2 weeks that I was there, I started slowing down, as I mentioned, and I'm on this trail. And the way you walk the Camino is you do have maps or whatever, but generally what they've done is they put yellow arrows along the path, and you just follow the yellow arrows. So I'm walking, I'm probably about 3/4 of the way through. And I'm walking on a path, and all of a sudden I'm going straight, and I hear someone yell from behind me that I'm on the wrong direction. And I stop, and she catches up to me, and her name is Cecile. She's from Toulouse, France. And she says, "No, you missed the arrow." And I did. And had I not gone left instead, I would have been probably terribly lost. So anyway, we walked for a bit together, and then she had a much slower pace than mine, even though I was slowed down. So I went ahead, and now I'm on this, this latter part where I'm slowing down, and I stop at a little cafe, which is right adjacent to the trail, to eat lunch. And pretty soon, like an hour later, here comes Cecile, and she sees me and she waves frantically. And she comes over to me and she says, "Hey, can I join you for lunch?" And I said, "Absolutely." So we start talking, and, as people are wont to do, she asked me what I do for a living. And I said, "Well, I do this martial art thing, but I'm also a life coach." And her eyes light up. "Oh, you're a life coach." She goes, "I'm on this path. I'm on this trail because of my boss made me get a life coach." She said, my life was so imbalanced that he said, if I don't get a life coach, he was going to fire me. And I was like, "Oh, wow, okay." Little different labor laws in France.
In France,
Story, right? So anyway, then she goes, I've spoken to more people on this trail in the last 3 weeks than I have in the last 20 years. I was like, whoa. And then she gets quiet, and then her eyes start to kind of well up in tears. And she says, "Tuesday was my mother's 80th birthday, and we were speaking on a Friday." She said, "Tuesday was my mom's 80th birthday, and I called her up. And for the first time in my life, I told her I loved her." And I mean, I couldn't speak, and pretty soon the tears are going down my cheeks. And I'm like, and we had this beautiful conversation, right? And so anyway, I love sharing that story because those were the types of things that happened frequently, these beautiful conversations with people, because everybody is on the trail, with maybe the exceptions for some of the teenagers that wanted to party for 500 miles. Most people are on that trail to just go deeper. And I just thought, what a gift. And then, of course, then the reflection comes, well, how am I showing up with the people that I love the most, right? Am I saying that I love them? Am I spending time with them? It was these beautiful lessons that just, the whole trail was littered with them. And I was just so fortunate to have that experience.
Yeah, you got to write a book.
Yeah, it's pretty awesome.
It is. All right, Chris, before I let you go, number one, I know you have a special offer for the listeners.
I do. Thank you. So as Tommy's so wonderfully shared, I have my new book called Breaking Through: 3 Winning Strategies to Create breakthrough results in your life, business, and relationship. And it's basically, I wrote it because I do something called a board breaking experience corporately. So I go into corporations and I help people identify a breakthrough area in their life or business, and then they also identify their limiting beliefs, and they literally write them on the board, on one side and the other, and then I coach them how to break the board.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and people have an amazing experience from this thing, right? I mean, I've had people, I've had someone as old as 77 years old do it. I've had, kids that are like teenagers do it, and the stories, Tommy, are amazing because, just having that physical explosion and break that board, it's such a great symbol. And I'll run into people here in Denver that have gone through it and they're like, oh, I loved it. That board's still in my office. And I always thought to myself, though, did you actually have the breakthrough that you said? Or did you just have a really neat experience with me that when you broke a piece of wood? So that's how this book came about. I thought, okay, what are the things that I teach people in my coaching practice all the time? I have three, it's 3 sections. Those are the 3 winning strategies. And within there's like 3 or 4 chapters per about how to take you from point A to point Z to have your breakthrough. And so that's what the book's about. But here's my little offer. You can go to my website, chrisnatzke.com, CHRISN as in Navy, ATZ as in zebra, KE.com, or you can simply text the word breakthrough, all one word, breakthrough, to 720-741-6263, 720-741-6263, and you can receive a free chapter of the book, and which is the introduction, which kind of sets the whole stage for the book. So if you'd like to take advantage of that, I would love people. And of course, you can find the book on Amazon. But if you want to get a little taste of it first, that's my offer for you.
Awesome. All right. You ready for the last question, Chris?
I'm ready.
All right, here we go. If you could step into my shoes, what would you have asked yourself that I did not ask? If you could step into my shoes, or in this case, I'm wearing socks, what would you have asked yourself that I did not ask?
Yeah. You know what? I think I would have asked you, and I say this because sometimes people think that because a high-ranking martial artist has this invincibility. I think I would have asked you, what scares you? What scares you? And I'm here to first say, just because I have a black belt with a lot of stripes on or whatever, it still doesn't mean I'm not human. And what scares me, and the greatest challenge, I think, is even though I've been very blessed to have a lot of great things happen in my life, I've had a very, very good life, and I've been very blessed with the people. I think my biggest fear is that I haven't done enough. I haven't taken the gifts and the opportunities that I've had and made a big enough impact. And that's, I have to be careful myself with that, not going too far over the edge on that. But what it does for me is it keeps me going, because I really believe there's more for me to do. And I want to make sure, it's like I can't remember the exact quote, but when you die, you want to roll in all beat up, all used up, and, ready to just pop in the grave because you did everything you could do. I want to make sure that what I get scared about is that I'm not doing enough to serve, and I haven't been using my gifts well enough. So that's what Beautiful. I would ask, and that's how I would answer it.
Well, Chris Natzke, Grandmaster Lee would, in my view, would be so proud of you. Even, I know he's still alive, but I'm just saying, I think you're living a purposeful life.
Thanks, my friend. I appreciate that. That means a lot. Thank you.
Breakthrough: 3 strategies to create breakthrough results in your life, business, and relationships. The new book by my good friend, Chris Natzke. Chris, I'm so happy we did this. We should have done this years ago, but that's okay. That's part of the journey.
Part of the journey. When we're doing it, it's perfect time. Perfect time.
Hey, have you ordered my new book, My Dad's Advice, at 5:04 a.m.? Why not? Just go to the website, mydadsadvicebook.com, mydadsadvicebook.com. Hey, what was your favorite M?